Hey, everyone, what is going on? Lauren Sisler here with AL.com, and we've got another signing day in the books, 2021. Check. And guess who's hanging out with us today? Mike Rodak to break things down for the greatest signing class of all time. So we're calling it the GCOAT, right? So we add the C in there to the GOAT. First and foremost, we're going to get into a recap of signing day. We want to thank our sponsor, Inline Lighting, for this one and sponsoring all of our segments for today and all of our recruiting. So pretty big day for Alabama. No surprises, though, really, when you look at sort of where they ended up. And, of course, the number one ranking there, 27 commits coming in. Looking at the 24/7 composite rankings, 7 5-stars, 16 4-stars. So just give us your overall thoughts. Let's just go ahead and put a big, pretty bow on this 2021 signing day.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about this a few times now that it's a few years old, but that early signing day really kind of knocks the wind out of this late one. And so we went into today really just looking at a couple players that they could add or at least in one case retain. And so in the morning, it was Kamar Wheaton, the 5-star running back from Texas who had already committed to Alabama back in December, but he's a guy who had not yet signed his letter of intent. There was some speculation that Oklahoma could still make a play at him. But this morning, he continued to stick with Alabama and signed his letter of intent with them. And then one of the best uncommitted players that was left in the afternoon made his decision. That's Terrion Arnold, safety out of Tallahassee, a 4-star prospect. And he chose Alabama over Georgia and Florida as well. And that's one where I think people were a little bit less certain going into today. I think a lot of people expected Alabama, but they weren't quite sure. And if you want to say that there was some drama today, that might be the only drama. Otherwise, things were, pretty much wrapped up already. They already had 25 players signed going back a few weeks ago. So really nothing a whole lot new today.
Yeah, and I'll bring this up again, and I brought this up earlier on early signing day, something that was kind of unique and interesting in talking to various coaches, and one specifically, Kirby Smart at Georgia, had mentioned to me in an interview, because we were sort of talking about, like, we're in the pandemic, the season's been extended, how are you doing this early signing period, and then it bleeds over, obviously, into the regular signing period. The rules are a little bit different. Things are a little bit different during this time, but one thing he had said to me was specifically that this year was unique and not necessarily more challenging in a lot of ways. You kind of had things sealed up a lot sooner. You didn't have people going in someone's house to try to steal a recruit. There was a lot more Zooming. You weren't having to kind of go out there and pull some sort of charade and bring in a whole entire parade of, bells and whistles to kind of like impress people. And then, they weren't getting the opportunity to come on campus and really visit. So, there were a lot of variables that kind of played into this, almost being a little bit more calm in many ways, this whole process of the recruiting. But, of course, Nick Saban, thinking about some of his comments, and we'll get to the big board here in a minute because I do want to go over some of the rankings. But Nick Saban, his news conference, kind of par for the course for Nick Saban, right?
Yeah, he just said for the most part it was a pretty good class for him, but they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish.
Pretty good. Right?
It was pretty good. It was all right. It's the best recruiting class in history. I mean, like you mentioned off the top, 24/7 Sports keeps their ratings each year of each player, and then those player ratings get combined into a team rating each year. And up until now, it was the 2010 Florida class coming off of that national championship for them, or a couple years before that, actually. But that success under Urban Meyer those few years, and that class that Florida put together, that held for more than 10 years now, up until this Alabama class. And once they locked in Kamar Wheaton, that really locked in the top spot of all time for this recruiting class. And that's a pretty big accomplishment considering some of the other classes that they've had. Does that mean that it will be, when we look back 10 years from now, the best class in terms of what they did on the field? You'll have to see. I mean, the 2017 class is going to be really hard to top with some of the names coming out of that one, and some more names going into the NFL in a couple months from that class as well. But yeah, this class was probably Nick Saban's best in terms of on paper, the grades and the rankings that these players have. And like you said, it was just sort of business as usual for Nick Saban today.
Yeah, and I do want our producer Patrick to pull up the big board, kind of just show us the rankings and how that works. I'm curious to know how this works. So obviously you mentioned 24/7 sports. That's you kind of have your recruiting rankings across the board. That's one obviously that we at AL.com follow closely. I just want to what is the metrics for figuring out what the greatest class of all time is? What is the metric system that they use to be able to determine, is it based on the amount of stars they bring in? Is there like a point system? Can you describe that for us?
Yeah, it's a point system. So each player gets a grade on a certain scale, and each website does it a little bit differently. Where the three major accepted websites are ESPN, Rivals, and 24/7. And each one has their own people watching film and making their grades of each player. And so naturally, the grades are going to be a little bit different from website to website. And, things change too a lot as more film is watched and kind of more opinions are, picked up on certain players. I think a good example is, the player that did sign today, and Terrion Arnold. 3 days ago, he was the 104th ranked player in this class. Today, he's number 50. So he went up 54 spots. We're months after football is being played in high school in Florida, and here he is moving up that much. So it's fluid. I mean, there's a certain amount of arbitrary nature to it. And again, 5 years from now, it may not matter what their grade was. And you look at the 2017 class for Alabama, some of the best players were 3- and 4-star recruits. Mac Jones and Devontae Smith and some of those guys. But some 5 stars pan out as well. I think Najee Harris was the top-rated player in that class for them that year, and here he is about to be a first-round pick. So, it's one of those things where, it's a nice little trophy to have to say that you're the best class, but it's still dependent a little bit on each person grading these players and watching film and kind of their subjective grade that they put on them.
Yeah, definitely subjective, but we can put the little goat emoji beside Nick Saban, and we can also put it beside this 2021 signing class, right? The goat emoji lives on. We got a lot of people tuning in from all over the place. We have Evelyn Wilder tuning in from Waikiki Beach. She says aloha, and folks from all over. We saw a California one in there, and of course lots of Alabamians, but we appreciate you guys watching. All right, Mike, so let me ask you, Nick Saban said that he felt they did a good job of filling the gaps, filling the holes. Where, in your opinion, and the opinions of many, is Alabama's greatest need, and how do you think they fulfilled that, not only obviously today and the very small amount of productivity they had today, but in this entire signing class? Where do you think they filled that?
Yeah, well, just the way that the sort of team they've become is this wide open passing team and scoring 50 points a game. And in order to kind of build that up each year, you need the talent at wide receiver, you need the talent at quarterback. To some extent, you need the talent at offensive line as well. And so those are areas of focus, or were areas of focus this year. I think they will be every year, especially at wide receiver. When you talk about losing Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle this year, or Judy and Ruggs the year before that, it's a lot of talent to be gone in 2 years. And Nick Saban has acknowledged that it's been a pretty major priority in their recruiting, not only this year, but last year as well. And, they had some good players as freshmen last year who I think will get some opportunities this season. And then they'll add 4 wide receivers in this class as well, including a couple 5 stars. So, that's, I think, about as good of a job as they could have done at receiver. And it's hard to not look at quarterback too. I think, Bryce Young is certainly the next guy in line and has a lot of talent as a 5-star coming out of Southern California, but you got to keep stocking that position. And you look at the 2017 class, they had both Tua and Mac Jones, and potentially 2 first-round picks right there. So it's not all just about one guy. And so Jalen Milroe, the 4-star quarterback they have coming in out of Texas, I think is still an important name. The way things go in Alabama could very well be playing in a year or 2 or whenever. So it's not all about Bryce Young. And I think, filling a need at quarterback. And I think Nick Saban wants to get a quarterback every year, but, I think they found one of the better ones, or at least he feels that way in Milroe.
Yeah, definitely. Any final thoughts just about this class and just sort of the road ahead? Obviously, we'll be diving into spring ball here before too long. I know winter workouts are getting fired up, and NFL draft will be coming at us pretty quickly. Just any final thoughts about this class, and obviously, as we said before, no real surprises, but at the end of the day, Nick Saban does what he does well, and it's obviously plugging in the coaches. We talked about that on the feed yesterday on SEC Insider, or on Monday, I should say. And then, of course, doing the same in the recruiting. What makes Nick Saban so darn good at this thing, right? Like, it's crazy.
Fulfilling prophecy at this point. I mean, it's just players who are coming because they know what this team has done in the past. And the results kind of speak for themselves, and it's a train that just keeps on moving with its own power. And, I think there's probably some people, and you hear it a little bit today too on social media, there's chatter about just, is this system broken, in the sense that you have a team like Alabama getting all the best players each year. And there's a lot of talk about it a month ago with the college football playoff and having the same couple teams cycle through that. The TV ratings for the college football playoff this year were some of the worst they've had in a while. And there's this sense in some circles around college football that it's too Alabama centric, too Ohio State centric, too Clemson centric, and these other schools don't have a chance. And, if you're an Oklahoma fan, if you're a, Washington State fan, if you're from a different conference that has no shot every year because of these teams at the center of it, you're probably looking at this Alabama class and rolling your eyes and saying, what are we supposed to do? If you're an Alabama fan, you're looking at it and saying it's more hard work from Nick Saban coming to fruition. And it's something that you probably shouldn't take for granted. And obviously the success that Alabama's had, the past 10, 12 years, they didn't really have a ton of success the 10, 12 years before that. So nothing's really guaranteed or for certain. And just because there's a few teams at the top right now doesn't mean that they'll change in the future. And I think that's something important to keep in mind in that debate as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Mike Rodak, always great insight. We appreciate it. 2021 signing class, as we mentioned before, going down as the greatest class of all time for Alabama. Take a look there. That's pretty much a wrap on today. And again, no real surprises coming from Alabama. Most everything was kind of a shoe-in, earlier in the year. I can't even remember when early signing day was. It seems like it all runs together. I guess December, right? Early in December. So again, we appreciate your insight, Mike, as always. And of course, we appreciate our sponsors, Inline Lighting, for hanging with us on recruiting and National Signing Day. And thank you guys all for watching. We'll see you next time.